Obstetric fistula is one of the most serious and tragic childbirth injuries. It is a hole in the birth canal caused by prolonged obstructed labor without access to timely and quality medical treatment. It leaves women and girls leaking urine, feces or both, and often leads to chronic medical problems and other challenges.
Fistula ndo zvimwe zvinhu zvatiri kukurukura panapa. Kukuwara kunoita madzimai pakusununguka, nhengo dzinenge dzakuvara, nhengo dzinogona kukuvara mushure mekusununguka. Munhu akaita labor kana kuti akarwadziwa nenhumbu kwenguva yakareba, mwana achitadza kubuda, zvinogona kukuvadza nhengo dzemukati, zvoita kuti nhengo dzinenge dzakuvara idzi zvinozokonzera kuti munhukadzi anoramba achibuda weti nguva nenguva. Vamwe vanogona kutokuvara zvokuti kunyange tsvina inogona kuramba ichibuda zvisina control. Saka ndo inonzi obstetric fistula iyoyo.
Obstetric fistula is an abnormal connection between the female reproductive tract, which is commonly known as the vagina, and the bladder, or an abnormal connection between the vagina and the rectum, such that a woman is left leaking urine or stool or both, and tends to result as a complication of prolonged obstructed labor.
Child marriage remains a common custom in developing countries. Nevertheless, it is a legislated human rights violation that prevents girls from becoming educated, maturing and enjoying life, and ultimately choosing their own life partners. It is against this background that a meeting was held to discuss the various challenges that women and girls face due to obstetric fistula.
Today, Amnesty International, in partnership with WILSA, we are having a stakeholders dialogue where we are unpacking the intersectionality between child marriages, access to sexual reproductive health rights, and the maternal morbidity called obstetric fistula.
Saka tiri pano tikutarisa zvinhu zvakasiyana-siyana zvakasangana nenyaya yeutano hwenhengo dzesikarudzi apo madzimai vanenge vakazvitakura nepavanenge vachisununguka uyezve pavanenge vasununguka.
We are unpacking and we are having conversations on this intersectionality and hoping to come up with ways on how we can end child marriages.
Obstetric fistula is a serious medical condition occurring after childbirth in which an aberrant communication develops between the vagina and another organ, usually the rectum or bladder, which may result in leakage of urine, feces, and blood. Obstetric fistula affects women of all ages and accounts for 8% of maternal deaths. In developing countries, obstetric fistula is accompanied by social and cultural stigmatization.
Like I said, obstetric fistula is a maternal morbidity or an injury that happens at birth. It usually comes about as a result of obstructed labor. So when a woman or a girl is giving birth, it can take long. And during the process, the head of the child can create a hole between the vaginal tract and the anus, or between the vaginal tract and the hole that produces, or the hole that urine passes through. So that creates a possibility where there is what we call uncontrollable leakage of urine or uncontrollable leakage of feces.
Now officially designated a violation of human rights, child marriage has far-reaching health, social, economic and political implications for girls and their communities.
Usually suffer a lot of ostracism, they suffer a lot of discrimination because of the stench that comes out of the urine and the feces.
Takatarisa vana vanororwa vari vadiki, miri yavo inenge isati yakodzera kuti vagone kusununguka mwana zviri normal. Saka zvatinozoona dzimwe nguva zvinoitika, vasikana vechidiki ava vanenge vaita pamuviri vanogona kuzosunungukira kumusha vasingaendi kuchipatara uko vanogona kubatsirwa. Saka vakasunungukira kumusha, munoona dzimwe nguva munhu anonzi aita 3 days ari pagata achirwadziwa nepamuviri. Izvozvo zvinogona kuita kuti nhengo dzemukati dzikuvare, zvinozokonzera mafistula atiri kutaura nezvawo.
So the most affected tend to be young mothers, so women who become pregnant when they are young, women who have prolonged labor and are not offered an opportunity for emergency cesarean section on time, as well as women who practice traditional practices where they tend to do assisted vaginal births in church shrines and other unregistered health places.
Obstetric fistula is a cultural issue. The underlying causes of obstetric fistula, to a large extent, has been child marriage. Eradicating child marriage will ensure that we reduce cases of obstetric fistula.
The issue around obstetric fistula is so many issues. It's a maternal issue, it's a culture issue, it's also an inequality issue.
Kuti tidzivirire dambudziko iri, chekutanga ngapapiwe dzidziso kuti munhu wese ane pamuviri ngaasunungukire kuchipatara, nekuti kuchipatara kana pane dambudziko vanoona zvekuita kana akasunungukira kuchipatara.
Prevention is better than cure, so we need to allow women to mature before they become mothers or become wives. So we need to end child marriages. We need to end early consent of sexual intercourse.
A notable number of women and girls in Zimbabwe are estimated to be living with fistula, with new cases developing every year, yet it is preventable. Its persistence is a reminder of gross inequalities, a sign of global inequality, and an indication that health and social systems are failing to protect vulnerable women.
People that are mostly affected by this condition are usually poor, uneducated, and they come from very remote areas. So when we look at from a cultural perspective, you will find that the research that we carried out highlighted that the people or the young women that develop this condition, it is usually as a result of system yekuzvarira, where a young girl is married off at a very tender age.
Tsika dzedu dzimwe dzekuti munhu ngaasunungukire kumba kuitira kuti vaone kuti pamuviri apa ndepe hama yavo here, murume anenge anzi ndiapa mwana pamuviri. Ndo zvimwe zvinoita kuti munhu aramba achirwadziwa ari kumba, nekuti vanoti kana nhumbu iri kuramba kusununguka vanogona kuti nekuti haasi mwana wepano. Saka idzodzo tsika dzinoda zvakare kuadreswa kuitira kuti mwana wese kana kuti munhukadzi wese, meseji yedu ndeye kuti munhukadzi wese ngaanyorese pamuviri kukliniki.
It's a heterogeneous mixture of reasons. You can't put one reason as the main cause. So with Manicaland, the commonest is that it's a mountainous area, then accessibility to health centers tend to be difficult, even with the best of transport. I'm also aware that some religious practices, they tend to shun away from normal religious, normal health facilities, and this tends to also to contribute to delays in women with labor. And then the last factor that was raised in our meeting earlier is that there's been a lot of awareness in Manicaland, such that this can be a false high, because just the awareness activities has resulted in a lot of patients coming in with fistula. Without
emergency intervention, obstructed labor can last for days, resulting in death or severe disability.
You find that mama system like ekuzvarira, ma system a paternity testing, where the family needs to confirm whether mwana ndewekwa mazvimbakupa, whether mwana ndewekwa mhofu, iyoyo iri kukonzeresa kuti vasikana vave at risk of condition iyoyo inonzi obstetric fistula.
Obstetric fistula is associated with devastating lifelong morbidity with medical, social, psychological, and economic consequences. The physical injuries combined with misconceptions about the causes of fistula often result in stigma and discrimination, leading to social isolation, psychological harm, and mental health issues.
Isusu sema pastors nenyaya yekuroorwa kuitwa nawadiki kunyanya kurodzwa vamwe vacha kutopinda nekufoswa zvinozokonzeresa zvirwere zvinonzi fistula zvinozovakanganisa future yavo, but semapastors tiri kuzvikondema zvisi right. Vananga vapiwe nguva yavo yekukura, mwana unyatsokura iwa a mature person
with obstetric fistula is unable to work. The right to work is compromised because nobody wants to employ a person who's got incontinence, urinary or fecal incontinence. Secondly, the loss of dignity. When you have urinary incontinence, there's a tendency to self-stigmatize. You cannot associate with people, you cannot freely assemble, be it a church gathering or any other gathering. You cannot freely, board a bus. So freedom of movement, freedom of association is usually affected.
It's a disease which stigmatizes young girls. Sometimes they really get traumatized because they cannot be with other people, since you will be discharging urine sometimes and some feces that are smelling. So most people, they don't want to be like next to you, and some women that are married or these young girls, they wound up being isolated in other rooms on their own or just sleeping there because they can't sleep with other people.
Although these young girls eventually find themselves in marriage, the marriage will not be a rosy one due to the effects of fistula.
The way forward is at various levels. Firstly, policy level. We have policies that prevent child marriages. These policies need to be implemented, particularly when you look at issues around child marriages. Child marriages is one of the biggest drivers of obstetric fistula, and we really need to ensure that as a country, the policies are implemented, and those who rape children are actually held to account. There is a culture of impunity that is worrying in Zimbabwe, and that culture really needs to be dealt with.
It looks like it's partly not being talked about, but also most problems that are genital in nature are difficult to really, say in the open easily. And remember, it tends to happen in the poor, who are marginalized and who are not empowered. Therefore, they can only come when they've actually received a push from a caregiver, from someone in authority. That's why it tends to be silent.
This condition, mwana muduku musikana aita mimba abara, inomukanganisa kuti asazogone kucontrola waste yake. Psychological effect yekuti haachakwanisi kugara nevanhu zvakanaka munharaunda. Even if kana akazoroorwa akura late, haachakwanisi kutogara nemurume since anenge akungonhuma. Everything chaakungoitika hazvisisiri sanitary.
Child marriage is the biggest driver of obstetric fistula. The continued occurrence of obstetric fistula is a human rights violation, reflecting the marginalization of those affected. Their isolation means they can go unnoticed by policymakers. It is therefore important for policies to be introduced to ensure an end to child marriage.
We have policies that prevent child marriages. These policies need to be implemented, particularly when you look at issues around child marriages. Child marriages is one of the biggest drivers of obstetric fistula, and we really need to ensure that as a country, the policies are implemented, and those who rape children are actually held to account. There is a culture of impunity that is worrying in Zimbabwe, and that culture really needs to be dealt with if ever we are to to deal with the issue around obstetric fistula.
WILSA is working in terms of addressing the issues around child marriages, and we are doing this by rolling out different projects. We are working on a project in different communities whereby we are raising awareness amongst adolescent girls and young women around their rights to sexual health and reproductive rights, and also their rights in terms of not getting raped, domestic violence. What we actually do is we train on the domestic violence so that they know the different forms of violations that they can face as women and girls. And so this program has really helped us to have dialogues with young women, adolescent girls in different spaces so that they begin to assert their rights, and also so that they know that when incidences of violations happen to them, what are the referral pathways where they can report so that they can also get assistance in terms of justice and also for health services.
There is need for a mind shift so that traditional and cultural beliefs do not continue to fuel child marriage.
We really need to think of our attitudes, our mindsets, and the behaviors that are fueling the problems of obstetric fistula in the country. So issues around harmful cultural practices, iwayo ekurodza nekuzvarira vana, we really need to stop that, and we really need to begin to see the girl child as from a different perspective than the one that we are used to. The girl child has got a future, and we really need to stop treating the girl child like a sex object and begin to see a doctor and begin to see a president and begin to see a future leader. That attitude towards the girl child should really change.
In terms of the law, there are certain gaps that need to be addressed. Now we celebrated the coming into an act of the Marriages Act, but there's also issues around the age of consent to sex, and also the legal age that you get married. So we need to make sure that these gaps are closed by aligning all these laws to the Constitution and also to the Marriages Act, so that we've got one age, so that we can curb the violations and the cases of child marriages that are widespread currently.
Reconstructive surgery can repair a fistula. Unfortunately, women and girls affected by this injury often do not know that treatment is possible and cannot afford it, or fail to reach the facilities where it is possible. Fistula camps have been done around Zimbabwe and have been a source of hope for the affected women and girls.
Chikonde chambuya wanga ambuya Yesu anatifela pakolokota kati mulungu musinde mukonda mafupa salila kwebete.
Women leaders from Zimbabwe and Malawi convened to exchange ideas on how to address gender inequalities. The Women's Leadership Exchange visit between Malawi and Zimbabwe was facilitated by the Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe with the aim of sharing experiences.
Today we have this solidarity with the delegation that has come from Malawi, where we are meeting to discuss the issues of similarity that affect women in our different countries.
So we are here under the exchange visit that has been organized by Oxfam for Zimbabwe Parliamentary Women's Caucus and Malawi Parliamentary Women's Caucus. So we are a partner of Oxfam in Malawi, and as an NGO we are invited to be part of this visit so that we can also learn in terms of how NGOs in Zimbabwe are interacting with the Parliamentary Women's Caucus in Zimbabwe.
Initially we went to Malawi from 23 to 25 October It was on an exchange visit where we wanted to learn how the Malawi caucus operates. So this is they've now come back here so that we also exchange notes and share ideas on how they do to improve the empowerment of women, and also to make sure that we have enough representation of women in parliament.
The exchange visit is critical in ensuring equal and full participation of women in decision making.
This is very important because we desire to see women's participation in various political spaces and key processes. So we believe that as we are meeting here, it's sort of like an exchange program where we are going to be sharing our success stories, our issues that are happening in our different countries, and see how best we can further strategize and also strengthen ourselves even as we are representing the SADC region.
For us, we say that women also have to take part in decisions that affect their lives. So if women are in positions of power, it means that when programs, when strategies, when plans of government are being drawn, women also be able to put their views, and then they'll be able to see how best those plans, those strategies, those programs are going to benefit women.
From here, we are pushing for 50-50, and we would also want to have more women in parliament. We've tried the quota system. It works in that it has enabled more women in parliament. But now we are saying now that women have mastered how to operate in parliament, how to make decisions, we are now saying we want more women to take up constituencies. We want 50-50.
It is important for women to take center stage on various issues that affect them, as this will enable them to come up with programs to uplift their livelihoods.
We have had the first female speaker of parliament in Malawi out of the lobbying that we did. Right now we have the female secretary to the president and cabinet. So those are some of the things that we have seen working.
So as we speak, we are trying to increase our number in parliament. One thing which I can point out that it is a success is that we work beyond our political parties. We do go to each other's constituency and campaign for each other, though we are coming from different political parties. So to me, that is an achievement.
The visit by the Malawian delegation is a momentous occasion as it brings together and enhance the work, aspirations and hopes in terms of enhancing women's participation as the two countries exchange notes for the benefit of women.
So we hope to achieve to learn new ways of working on women's rights issues, because we know that there are some things that are working in Zimbabwe. So for us, as we're going back to Malawi, we want to take all those new things that we have learned so that we can implement back home. For example, one of the things that we have noted in Zimbabwe is that you have a proportional representation in parliament. So those are some of the things that we are trying to learn, because in Malawi we are using first past the post. So sometimes it's very difficult to get more women into parliament. But now we are learning that we can even use the other route of ensuring that there's proportional representation which can still enable women to go into parliament.
As the Zimbabwe Women Parliamentary Caucus, we feel this exchange visit is actually very important, and it is going to improve the way we run things in Zimbabwe, especially the issue of women's representation, the women's rights. For example, in Malawi, when we went there for the first time from 23 to 27 October 2022, we actually saw that they are a bit ahead of us in terms of women's representation.
The Malawian delegation includes women legislators who defied all odds in patriarchal communities. Honorable Esther from Malawi has been able to break new ground to become the first female MP in 50 years.
I'm coming from an area where is dominated by Muslims. I'm the first female MP after 50 years of independence, and This is my second time in Parliament. During my time, I planned to stand on a party ticket, but because I was not well known, I was coming from a very poor background, and the party did not support me to stand on their ticket, so people encouraged me to continue and stand on an independent ticket. We have managed to change the attitude of the public, that now people, they see the advantage of voting for a woman. A lot of constituencies that are being represented by women, they are doing better in terms of development, and also the coordination and working relationship with various NGOs.
Other delegates who attended the meeting included Oxfam officials, Women's Academy for Leadership and Political Excellency, and the Parliament of Zimbabwe.